Hello, welcome to my channel Dwina Zain. This video reading practice to improve your pronunciation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, guys.
Johnny Carson served as host for the iconic late-night television series The Tonight Show for 30 years. During that time, Carson entertained generations of American television viewers with his down-to-earth style, casual approach, and quick-witted humor. The Tonight Show was already a big success when Carson took over from the retiring Jack Paar, but Carson took the show to the next level. His style and grace on camera has been mimicked by many late-night talk show hosts, who have credited Carson as their mentor. Carson was born thousands of miles away from the glitz of New York City and Los Angeles in the city of Corning, Iowa, in 1925. Carson began his entertainment career at the age of 14 when he appeared at county fairs as a magician, which was his first love. His family moved to the state of Nebraska when Carson was a young man, and he served as a communications officer for the U.S. Navy during the tail end of World War II. His broadcast career began in 1950 in Omaha, Nebraska, before moving to Los Angeles and landing a job with a local television station. Carson officially became the host of The Tonight Show on October 1, 1962. The show was based in New York City until 1972, when, at Carson's request, the show was permanently moved to the Los Angeles area. Carson hosted his show in Burbank for the next 21 years, where he perfected his style and approach to his guests. It was considered an honor to be invited to The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson. Carson was a true entertainer. He performed many skits during his reign, where he dressed up in costume and played ridiculous characters, which is something today's late-night hosts do not do. Carson was never afraid to laugh at himself. Helen Keller was an American educator and journalist who became one of the leading humanitarians in the history of the United States. Born on June 27, 1880, in Tuscumbia, a small town in Alabama, Keller was stricken with a childhood disease that left her deaf and blind. The illness Keller suffered is a mystery to this day. She was diagnosed with brain fever by her family doctor, but most people speculate that she suffered from either scarlet fever or meningitis. Unable to see or hear, Keller became difficult to deal with as her behavior was described by her family and friends as wild. Soon Keller and her family developed their own type of sign language that allowed them to communicate on a limited basis. Helen's mother sought help for her anguished child, which eventually led to Anne Sullivan, who was a recent graduate of the Perkins Institute for the Blind. The school had been successful in the past in educating blind students, and Sullivan was one of its star graduates. Once Sullivan and Keller got through the difficult beginnings, their friendship and association lasted for 49 years. Keller was determined to become educated and to teach herself to communicate. After attending several schools, she became the first deaf and blind person to earn a college degree. She became very well known and began a lecture tour where she addressed social and political issues, including women's suffrage and birth control. In 1920, she helped found the American Civil Liberties Union, which is still active today. She addressed Congress to raise awareness to the plight of the blind. Through all her accomplishments, she fell into disfavor with the American public because of her socialist views later in life. She died in her sleep just days before her 88th birthday, but she lives in the American consciousness for her tireless work and perseverance. It was not so long ago that women in the United States were treated like second-class citizens. They did not have the same basic rights as their male counterparts had. At one time, women were not allowed to vote, own property, or get education. Since those dark times, the women of America have made great strides in their struggle for equality. One of their heroes was the great Billie Jean King. King was a professional tennis player who gained great success during her career on the women's tennis court. She won 39 Grand Slam titles, 12 singles, 16 women's doubles, and 11 mixed doubles. She found success in just about every avenue she participated in, including the Federation Cup Championships. King's greatest accomplishment, however, was an exhibition match that took place in Houston, Texas on September 20th, 1973. The 29-year-old King, who was at the top of her professional career at the time, faced a former Wimbledon champion, Bobby Riggs. Riggs was one of the best men's players during his prime in the late 1930s and 40s. The 55-year-old Riggs challenged King to an exhibition match, claiming that the women's game was far inferior to the men's game. He said that even a 55-year-old washed-up former player could beat the top woman in the world. The stage was set for a match. However, it was not much of a match at all. King soundly defeated Riggs without much trouble. The match was later exposed for what many people claimed it would be, a showcase for King to demonstrate that women could compete against men. The victory was part of the equal rights movement that was sweeping the nation during the time. King became an outspoken advocate of equal rights for women. Madonna Louise Ciccone is a popular singer, songwriter, and actress in the United States. Madonna, as she is commonly known, burst onto the music scene in the early 1980s with a style that had never been seen before. Her sexy and scantily clad costumes and performances both delighted and aggravated the American public for years. She excelled at pushing the boundaries of what most Americans perceived as acceptable in their music videos and live performances. Madonna did not shy away from controversial subjects either. Madonna was born in Bay City, Michigan in 1958. She moved to New York City to pursue a career in dancing as a young woman. She began her career with a couple of club bands in New York, but was soon noticed by music industry executives. In 1983, she released her first album, titled simply Madonna. This was just the beginning for the superstar. She followed her initial success with several hit albums and singles such as Like a Virgin and Into the Groove. She coupled her commercial success in music with successful performances in a series of movies such as Desperately Seeking Susan and Evita. It seemed there was nothing Madonna could not do. One of Madonna's defining characteristics is her ability to reinvent herself. Many artists find success in the very competitive and entertainment industry, but most are only successful for a short period of time. But not Madonna. She has sold more than 300 million records worldwide to date. She ranked second only to the Beatles on Billboard's charts of greatest acts of the 20th century. Madonna's career has not been without controversy, though. She has been the subject of several lawsuits for her acts, but she survived and thrived through it all. She is still one of the best female artists in the United States today. The United States of America is the only country ever to land a manned spacecraft on the surface of the moon. The first person to walk on the moon was Neil Armstrong. Armstrong set foot on the surface of the moon on July 20th, 1969, in what was one of the most watched telecasts in the history of the country. Armstrong became an instant celebrity whose name became a household word for generations to come. The lunar landing mission was carried out on the Apollo 11 spacecraft. Armstrong was the mission commander for the historic flight and was the second and last mission flown by him. There were complications involving the landing module that Armstrong dealt with at the time of the landing. The module was coming in faster than planned. It was destined to miss the landing site by several miles, but some quick thinking by Armstrong prevented a potential disaster. When Armstrong did step on the lunar surface, his words echoed throughout the country and the world. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Years later, Armstrong and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, insisted that the quote was incorrect and was obscured by interference. However, the quote is remembered forever in its original form. Armstrong received the Congressional Medal of Freedom from President Richard Nixon and was later awarded the Congressional Space Medal of Honor by President Jimmy Carter. The program was discontinued in the early 70s. Other countries have landed unmanned missions to the Earth's largest satellite, but to date, no other person has walked on the moon since then. Neil Armstrong, a true American hero, died in 2012 following complications from a surgical procedure.
The Farm Festival. Once there was a farm. Many animals lived there. One day, they had a contest in the yard. They were going to race from the barn to the farmer's garage. The barn and the garage were far apart. It would be a long race. The winner qualified to win a bag full of apples as an award. But the race did not start well. The cart with all the apples was not stable, and the animals had to repair it. Then the pup knocked over the apples. The pig yelled, "We are going to slip. We must clean up this mess." The pup felt bad, and she began to cry. The dog gave her a tissue to wipe her tears. Then the race resumed. But the duck tried to rob them and take all the apples. The cat said, "I will have you arrested." The duck said, "You can't convict me. You can't prove I took it." The race stopped yet again. The animals tried to race one more time. Then they heard an alarm coming from the barn. There was a fire. They got buckets of water to put out the fire. A journalist came to write a story about the festival and the race. The horse told her, "I am a special breed of horse. I would have won the race easily." The pig said, "It was somewhat hard to have the race, but we had fun. That is what's important."
ListenAminute.com. Parenting. Being a parent is the biggest responsibility we can have in our lives. It's scary if you think about it. You have to look after a tiny baby for years and years. It is your duty to make sure that little baby grows up into a wonderful, happy, and responsible human being. Parenting means knowing everything from day one. This is a shock to many parents. I didn't have any parenting lessons. I suddenly had a baby to look after. But it's not that scary. In fact, parenting is life's biggest joy. I can't put into words how wonderful it is to be a parent. My biggest worry is that society doesn't focus on parenting. We really should have classes at school on being good parents. I'm sure we would reduce the number of problems in society if we did this.
Perhaps no other name in daytime variety shows brings out more emotion than Jerry Springer. Springer has been a talk show host for several years on the show that bears his name, The Jerry Springer Show. His show is described as a tabloid talk show because of the controversial subjects covered, and because of the people who appear on the show. Springer does not invite celebrities to his show. Instead, he opts to showcase regular Americans from all walks of life. He is a former politician who served one term as mayor of the city of Cincinnati, Ohio in the 1970s. His show debuted in 1991 as a politically themed talk show, where he invited celebrities such as Oliver North and the Reverend Jesse Jackson. The show was designed to mimic another popular daytime talk show, The Phil Donahue Show. The show found moderate success, but in 1994, in order to boost ratings, the show transitioned to a more sensational format. In this new format, everyday people were confronted by family members and friends about controversial subjects. The show has been highly rated for decades now, but has also come under fire from many groups who claim the subjects are not appropriate for daytime television. Springer does not shy away from any subject. Guests are confronted about subjects such as adultery, prostitution, homosexuality, and hate group membership. Often, these confrontations become violent, where guests engage in physical confrontations. The Springer Show has spawned numerous copycat shows over the years, but it still outrates every other show of its kind. In May 2000, a female guest on The Springer Show was murdered by her ex-girlfriend after viewing the episode. Springer, his producer, and the networks were sued by the women's children. The suit alleged that the controversial nature of the show led to the murder, even though the suit was dropped.
Whoa. Stop. Stop. Stop, damn it. Stop. Noah was astounded. His heart was racing. Webster Noah's 18-year-old driving student had just run a red light. Instead of stopping at the light and then making a right turn after traffic had gone by, Webster had gone straight through the red light while two northbound cars were approaching the intersection. Luckily, both cars were driving slowly enough that they were able to brake. Webster at the last second managed to turn north. Otherwise, he would have collided into the southbound traffic on Allen. After turning north on Allen, Webster stopped the car. "What are you doing? What are you doing? You can't stop here. Go, go, go. We're going to get rear-ended. Get moving." Webster had stopped the car because he was confused and rattled. Noah's yelling certainly didn't help matters. Webster slowly accelerated. Noah told him to move to the right lane when it was safe. Webster turned on the signal, looked around the right rear to make sure no one was in his blind spot, and got into the right lane. At Orange Grove, Webster signaled again and made a right turn. Noah told him to pull over the curb. Webster parked the car. "Webster, I'm sorry I yelled at you, but you cannot run a red light. When you're moving forward, you've always got to be looking at what's in front of you. You make a turn after you make sure the light or traffic permits you to. We could both be in the hospital right now, but we're okay. Thank the Lord. And no cop was around, so we're double okay. So let's just take a breather, and when you're ready, we'll get back on the road. And from now on, when I say stop or brake, do so immediately."
The Lucky Knife. I've devoted my life to studying past generations. Last year, I had a unique chance to work with my uncle. Our job was to find old treasures for a school's history foundation. He also hired a crew of students. They signed a contract to work with him. He was the boss. The place was strange, though. I dined on many things that I had never tasted before. They had an unusual flavor. We had been there about a month and hadn't found anything. One day, I began to dig in the soil. The ground's layers got wetter. Soon I was digging in the mud. My shovel began to get very heavy. It felt like it had doubled in weight because the ground had absorbed a lot of water. Finally, I saw something in the mud. It was an old knife. The handle felt smooth in my hand. I elevated it so I could see it better. There was writing on it. "It says it will bring good luck," my uncle said with a smile. "Why don't you keep it?" I put it in my tent. The next day, we found many more things. There were pots, jewelry, and weapons. My uncle donated all of the things to a special committee. Many newspapers wrote stories about it. It seemed the knife really did bring good luck.
6 consecutive days of spring rain had created a raging river running by Nancy Brown's farm. As she tried to herd her cows to higher ground, she slipped and hit her head on a fallen tree trunk. The fall knocked her out for a moment or two. When she came to, Lizzie, one of her oldest and favorite cows, was licking her face. The water was rising. Nancy got up and began walking slowly with Lizzie. The water was now waist high. Nancy's pace got slower and slower. Finally, all she could do was to throw her arm around Lizzie's neck and try to hang on. About 10 minutes later, Lizzie managed to successfully pull herself and Nancy out of the raging water and onto a bit of high land, a small island now in the middle of acres of white water. Even though it was about noon, the sky was so dark and the rain and lightning so bad that it took rescuers another 2 hours to discover Nancy. A helicopter lowered a paramedic who attached Nancy to a life support hoist. They raised her into the helicopter and took her to the school gym where the Red Cross had set up an emergency shelter. When the flood subsided 2 days later, Nancy immediately went back to the island. Lizzie was gone. She was one of 19 cows that Nancy lost. I owe my life to her, said Nancy sobbingly.
No one ever outsmiled Magic Johnson. Ever since he was a young man, Johnson has been known for his great attitude towards life. It just so happens that Johnson is also one of the greatest basketball players to ever play in the National Basketball Association. Johnson played his entire career for the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are the best franchise in the NBA over the past 40 years, having won more championships than any other teams. During the 1980s, the Lakers were known as Showtime because of the team's high-paced and high-scoring style of play. Much of this style can be attributed to the charismatic Johnson. His style developed at an early age when he was playing basketball in his home state of Michigan. He attended Michigan State University and led its team to the National Collegiate Athletic Association (NCAA) title in 1979. He was taken by the Lakers as their first pick in the college draft, and he never left. Johnson played for the Lakers from 1980 through 1991, and then played for a few games in '96. During the 80s, he led the Lakers to 8 championship appearances and won 5. No other team had dominated the game in a single decade since the Boston Celtics in the 60s. He also won Olympic gold medal in basketball and won the Most Valuable Player awards multiple times. But his most endearing quality remained as one of the nicest yet well-liked players in the game. Today, Johnson still calls Los Angeles his home. He has transitioned from basketball player to coach to team owner and businessman. He owns a successful franchise of movie theaters called the Magic Johnson Theaters. Johnson was also part of the investment group that purchased the Los Angeles Dodgers baseball team in 2012. He is married and has 2 sons and a daughter.